Yo, welcome back everybody to a brand new video here on the second channel, and today we're going to look at 12 new Temporal Forces decks with, of course, Decklists included in today's video. Of course, the set does release on Pokemon TCG Live tomorrow on the Thursday, and I am really excited for it, so I thought it'd be a great opportunity to really get into gear by looking at 12 new decks from this brand new set. Now, of course, with Temporal Forces, there's also rotation, but these are all just going to be decks based on the new cards. We're not looking at, like, older archetypes updated with the new format, just straight up new archetypes. If y'all are excited for the video, make sure to leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe down below here on the second channel. We're on the road to 12,000 subscribers here. Hopefully this video helps you out getting started within the brand new set on Pokemon TCG Live. If you're looking to build some of the new decks, like I said, hope this video helps you out and all that good stuff. I've done these videos before for the past set, so I'm excited to once again do it again with Temporal Forces. This set is going to be a banger, and I think without further ado, let's get into the 12 decks. All right, the first deck I wanted to look at was Great Tusk Mill. Now, Great Tusk Mill is going to be bringing Mill back in a big way. Mill hasn't really ever been that popular of an archetype, but definitely when competing with control decks. But with Great Tusk coming out, Mill will be back into the meta with its attack for 2 colorless energy, discarding the top card of your opponent's deck. However, if you do play an Ancient Supporter card from your hand this turn, you can discard 4 cards. So the 2 ancient supporters we got is Professor Sada's Vitality, which can obviously help you accelerate energy to your Great Tusk, and of course the Explorer's Guidance, which does allow you to look at the top 6 cards of your deck, take 2 of them, and discard the other 4 cards. These are your 2 ancient supporter cards that you want to be playing in combination with Great Tusk's Mill attack. Great Tusk is a 140 HP basic, so it is quite tanky if you combine it with, of course, cards like Ancient Booster Capsule, Bravery Charm, and of course Hero's Cape, the new Ace Spec card, which can give the Great Tusk plus 100 HP. You can make for yourself a very annoying attacker that is hard to one-shot and can also be milling your opponent constantly over and over. Milling your opponent's resources can also be very tricky for your opponent to deal with, because sometimes you're going to be milling very valuable cards that try to make it so that the Great Tusk is easier to knock out. Like if you're against Shempow, for example, and if you're milling their superior energy retrievals and super rods, they're going to have a hard time essentially knocking out this Great Tusk in one hit. Of course, with the combination of Mimikyu in the deck too, making it even more annoying for EX-based decks to deal with this deck, this could definitely be a brand new archetype that looks to be very powerful in our new format. And with Mill coming back, it's going to shake things up quite a bit. And I'm not going to lie, Great Tusk even has a decent matchup against Snorlax. So, hey man, Great Tusk, it's looking like it's going to be a good deck in our new format. Dialga V-Star might finally be a successful deck within the Pokemon TCG standard format, all thanks to the brand new Metang, with its ability to look at the top 4 cards of your deck and attach any number of basic metal energy you find there to your Pokemon in any way you like. It's a great way to get energy into play onto your Dialga V-Star for Dialga V-Star's big Star Chronos attack. Now, we've seen Dialga work before with Magnezone. The problem with Magnezone, though, is that it's a Stage 2 Pokemon, and it relies on rare candy. It's always been more of a meme deck, and it's always been a little too slow and hard to get out. But Metang is a whole lot easier to use because it's a Stage 1 Pokemon. Being able to easily use the brand new Buddy Buddy Poffin to get out your Beldums is really nice. Now, this list here that I got was actually a deck that won a City League over in Japan. Now, this one does have Hisuian Basculegion, which for no energy can do 20 damage times the amount of basic energy in your discard pile, and then you shuffle them back into your deck. It's a great way to put energy in your deck for Metang's ability. It's a really interesting concept to have the Basculegion. You do have a lot of other attackers in the deck, not just your big Dialga V-Star, but you also have the Zamazenta 1-Prizer with that Retaliate attack, doing 220 damage if something was knocked out. You also can play Mew EX in the deck as not only a kind of a draw card, but also can attack in this deck. It doesn't require a specific energy type, so you can use Metang to even power up your Mew EX, which can be really good against something like Giratina V-Star, because you can copy Lost Impact for 280 damage. Dialga Metang is looking like a pretty strong new archetype, and I cannot wait to try out this deck when it comes out, because it actually could make Dialga a good deck finally. One of the strongest new single prize decks coming out of Temporal Forces is, of course, Ancient Box, a deck that I am really excited to try out. I've even built this deck IRL because I am just that excited to try it out. It all revolves around the brand new Roaring Moon, which for 2 dark energy does 70 plus 10 more damage for each ancient card in your discard pile. Now, taking a look at this deck, there are a lot of ancient cards in the deck. We have all the Pokemon, the Koraidon, the Fluttermane, the Roaring Moon. We got Sada, Explorer's Guidance, Earthen Vessel, the brand new Awakening Drum, Ancient Booster Energy Capsule, just a ton of ancient cards in this deck. It's very easy to actually go through a lot of your deck very quickly throughout the course of the game, allowing Roaring Moon to hit some pretty insanely high numbers. You get built-in energy acceleration for your 2 dark energy thanks to the Professor Sada. The Explorer's Guidance allows you to look at the top 4 cards of your deck, take 2 of them, discard 4. Sometimes you can take 2 cards and then discard 4 ancient cards, plus the Explorer you just played. That's plus 5 for Roaring Moon in 1 turn. The Koraidon is no slouch either, with its attack that does 30 damage for each of your ancient Pokemon in play. You can actually use Koraidon as a really nice early game beat stick. As long as you fill your board up with ancient Pokemon, depending on whether or not you want to bench that Radiant Greninja or not, you can actually do 180 damage, which is a pretty good amount of damage to do early on in the game, because Roaring Moon's not going to hit super hard right away. You do have to kind of set it up more for the later half of the game. That's where the Koraidon comes in early game. Flutter Mane's really good too with its ability, which if it's in the active spot, your opponent's active Pokemon doesn't have an ability. It's going to be really annoying for Lost Zone archetypes, because if they have a Comfey in the active, they can't do Flower Selecting, which really can slow your opponent down quite a bit. It can be good against other stuff like Charizard EX. They can't evolve their Charizard EX into the active, because then they can't do their ability to put the energy onto the Charizard. A lot of really cool uses come out of Flutter Mane. But I am super excited for Ancient Box. It is one of the best new single price decks in the new format, and I cannot wait to try it out. This is the build here that got top 16 at the recent Champions League in Japan, and man, am I excited to play this deck. Single price decks have never felt more better. One of the most underrated new cards in the new set, in my opinion, is Incineroar EX. I think this actually could be a pretty decent new archetype within our new format. Now, Incineroar does have an ability that for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon, it requires 1 less colorless energy in its attack cost. Now, its main attack does require 5 energy to do 240 damage, but also it burns the opponent's active Pokemon, so you can do 260 damage, potentially for a single fire energy if your opponent benches a ton of Pokemon, which is pretty nice. Punishing your opponent for benching Pokemon is always strong. It's one of the reasons why something like Palkia V-Star has always been such a strong card. Now, you can combine Incineroar with the brand new Relicanth, which actually lets Incineroar copy the attacks from the previous evolutions below it, meaning that if you have a Litten, which you obviously will have underneath your Incineroar, you can copy Litten's attack, which for 2 fire energy does 20 damage for each damage counter on the Litten, meaning that you can hit really hard with Incineroar if Incineroar takes a ton of damage. Instead of relying on your main attack, if Incineroar takes like 15 damage counters, if it takes maybe 150 damage, you can clap back for 300 damage for just 2 fire energy, all thanks to Relicanth's ability. I think Incineroar is actually really underrated, and there's even a Torracat, which has a pretty good attack you can copy too. Incineroar is actually a pretty underrated card, like I said, and I can't wait to try it out. Now, I've seen a lot of lists from Japan playing Bibarel as a Drongin. I do like the idea of playing Bibarel and even having Pidgeot EX in the deck, because you can actually use Pidgeot in combination with Incineroar to help you kind of chain attackers. Of course, you are already playing Rare Candy. Incineroar kind of reminds me a little bit like Charizard EX in the same vein, and having Bibarel Pidgeot doesn't seem like a bad idea. This build here from Japan does also play Rabsca instead of Manaphy and Jirachi. You can kind of go back and forth with whichever one you want. Also, having access to the Hero's Cape could be kind of spicy, giving Incineroar even more HP, making that Litten even more deadlier when you are copying it with the Relicanth. But I'm excited for Incineroar, and like I said, it's a very underrated deck, and hopefully we can see Incineroar have some success in its run. Now, we looked at an Ancient Box deck, but now it's time to look at Future Box. Now, I wanted to look at a Future Box deck that wasn't just solely an Iron Hands EX deck, which has actually been the way to play the Future archetype in Japan, is to play it with Iron Hands and Iron Crown and the new Heavy Baton tool. But I do think that a straight Future Box deck using a ton of different Future attackers is also a really cool concept. This deck all comes together with the brand new Miraidon and the brand new Iron Crown. Iron Crown has an ability that when it's on the bench, your Future Pokemon's attacks do 20 more damage to your opponent's active. Iron Crown's ability does indeed stack, so when you have a ton of Iron Crown in play, your future Pokemon can do a ton of damage. And then you have the Miraidon, which has the attack Peak Acceleration, which can do 40 damage, and you can attach up to 2 basic energies from your deck to your future Pokemon in any way you like. It's a great way to actually accelerate energy into play, and if you go second and can attack turn 1 with your Miraidon, you can not only potentially knock out a basic Pokemon with some Iron Crown damage on top of it, but you can also build up your attackers. Some of the main attackers that a future Toolbox deck wants to play is, of course, Iron Hands EX, being able to use Ampy very much for the extra prizes, and, of course, Iron Valiant, and even the brand new Miraidon EX are all cool partners that you can also use that require Psychic Energy. There's also Iron Leaves EX, one of the stars of the deck. Of course, being a Grass-type Pokemon is huge against Charizard EX. The deck does have a very strong strong A-Spec with Reboot Pod, allowing you to attach a basic energy from your discard pile to one of each of your future Pokemon in play. So if you have 5 future Pokemon in play and 5 basic energy in the discard pile, you can put 5 energy in play in a single turn with that Reboot Pod. It's a great way to accelerate energy into play, and it is an insane card to have within the Future Box deck. Future Box is looking pretty promising, and there's a ton of ways you could theoretically build a Future Box deck. Now, like I said, the Iron Hands, Iron Crown deck does seem to be the most popular way to play the deck right now in Japan, but I did want to highlight more of a toolbox, future box approach with the deck. Even Iron Boulder, which a lot of people think is one of the worst EXs in the set, is actually being pretty played in the future decks due to its fighting type being really good against other fighting weak Pokemon like Iron Hands and Arceus V-Star. But I'm excited to try out Future Box. There's so many ways to play it, and I can't wait to try to crack the code and build a really good Future Box deck. Now, on to an EX that we should have got a long time ago, but you know what? Better late than never is going to be the brand new Scovillain EX. Now, this is a Grass-type Pokemon. Keep in mind, being a Grass-type will be nice with the Charizard popularity that will be in our new format. It does have a very cool attack that for 2 Grass Energy does 140 damage and discards a random card from your opponent's hand and the top card of their deck. Now, if you combine this with annoying disruption cards, as you can see, like Judge, you have Crushing Hammer to remove their energy, and you have League Headquarters to make it very hard for your opponent to attack. This deck can be very annoying to play against, and just being a Grass type will be nice to have if you're playing against something like Charizard EX or even Roaring Moon, which this card probably would have been a lot better in our format right now, but honestly, better late than never, like I said. With all the annoying disruption cards that this deck has, Scovillain will be a very annoying card to play against. This build here did actually get top 16 at a City League recently, and it's a pretty interesting list, using, of course, Mimikyu in the deck to be even more annoying, having the Hero Cape A-Spec card to make your Scovillain even more bulkier, as it only really does have 260 HP, but having the Judge and the Iono spam will be really nice to have, as again, you can easily slow your opponent down, remove cards from their hand, discard the top card of your deck. It can almost do anything, which is pretty cool. The one thing with Scovillain that'll be interesting is how to really charge it up. It does require 2 energy, so you do have to attach to attack with it, but it does look like a promising, fun, little annoying archetype, and will definitely be one to definitely try out when it comes out, especially if there's going to be a lot of Charizard. Why not play the brand new Scovillain? Now, speaking of cards that could be annoying to play against, we got Gengar EX next. Now, another card that I think a lot of people wrote off as unplayable has been actually getting some top 16s in some City Leagues, for example, with this list. Now, Gengar EX does have an ability that whenever your opponent attaches an energy from their hand to one of their Pokemon, they have to put 2 damage counters on it. You can also, of course, pair this with Crushing Hammer to force your opponent to lose their energy, so they have to keep attaching. And you have Giovanni's Charisma, which allows you to attach energy from your hand to Gengar, but also lets you put an energy from your opponent's Pokemon back into their hand, which also means that they then have to reattach it to activate Gengar's ability. The ability also stacks. You can have multiple Gengar in play in order for this ability to work. And of course, with the combination of that, we have Gengar's own attack, which also can be good with the ability, doing 160 damage for 2 dark energy. And then you can move an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon to one of their bench Pokemon, which is another really strong attack you can have. If your opponent has a Pokemon on their bench that isn't very good, like even, for example, Squirtle or Bibarel, just Pokemon that, you know, they can attack, but they won't be doing a lot of damage, you can move the energy to them, making it harder for your opponent to attack and forcing them to be a little bit more cautious with their energy resources. Gengar is a stage 2, but you can see this build here that did get top 16 at a City League, does play the TM Evolution as a way to get your Honors out. There's some other Gengars you can play also in the deck. There is, of course, the new Gengar from Paldean Fates, and there's a few other Gengars I think in the format you could technically play in this deck for other one-prize options, but the Gengar EX is definitely the highlight of the deck. And honestly, I'm excited to try this deck out and see how fun it can be to play and annoy the opponent with all the energy you're moving. And it'll be funny to play against a deck like Shempao. Whenever they use Super Cold, they're going to take a ton of damage, which will be pretty hilarious. There's going to be some pretty funny things to happen with this deck. All right, next up we have another one-prize attacker, and that's going to be the brand new Feraligator. Now, I'm sure some of y'all actually have experience with this card already, as it was featured in the Temporal Forces pre-release kit. So you might already have played it, but it does have that ability where you can put 5 damage counters onto the Feraligator, and then its attacks to the opponent's active Pokemon will do 120 more damage. Its main attack does 160 damage for 2 water. With the 120 damage boost you get with the ability, that's 280 damage. Now, Feraligator is an evolution and a water Pokemon, which is really good synergy. As you can see, this build here, that did get top 16 at a City League, has Palkia V-Star in the deck, which is another really strong attacker. But you can, of course, use Palkia's V-Star power, Star Portal, to put the energy onto your Feraligator to power it up that way. And you can also use Reversal Energy, which this deck does play 1 copy of the reversal, which allows you to attach reversal energy to Feraligator to also power the attack up in 1 energy for being behind in the prize trade. You can also play the EXP shares in the deck. You can put on your bench Totodiles and Feraligators to build it up. One of the big things with playing a deck like this is that you do lose Melanie, so you don't really have a great way to power up your Palkia anymore. There's also no Raihan, which would have been really good for the Feraligator. So to offset that, there is, of course, the EXP shares in the deck to help you set up. Getting Feraligator out is not really that hard. Thankfully, it is a water-type Stage 2 Pokemon, meaning that all you have to do is play Irida from your hand, and you can get Rare Candy and Feraligator for free, which is pretty insane. So there's a great way to get the card out thanks to Irida. You have some energy acceleration with Palkia. You have reversal energy as you are in evolution. One prize Pokemon. There's a lot of really cool things you can do with Feraligator. It hits really high numbers, doing 280 damage for 2 water. It's looking pretty promising as another really cool one prize attacking deck in the format. Grass might get a lot better with this set, and that's thanks to the brand new Torta EX, which does have an attack that does 30 damage for each of your grass Pokemon in play. Now, the nice thing with Torterra, it has a lot of good synergy with a lot of the grass things in the format. Main one, of course, we do have is the Grottle, which obviously you do need to get a Torterra out. Grottle's got an ability that lets you search your deck for a grass Pokemon and put it into your hand. Thanks to Grottle, you have some ways to get out your Pokemon. Now, this build here did get top 16 at a City League and plays a ton of grass-type Pokemon. Some big ones to note, we do, of course, have Iron Leaves in the deck as another attacker. There's the Toadscruel line, which is kind of cool. You can play both Toadscruels. You got the Toadscruel EX, which can stop Roaring Moon from frenzy gouging you, and Sableye and Star Requiem from affecting you. And there's also the Toadscruel from Paradox Rift that prevents your opponent from being able to use cards like Superior Energy Retrieval, which is really good against Goldengo and Chempao. There's also Lilligant V-Star in the deck, which can use its V-Star power to get you a ton of grass Pokemon and energy off the rip. So definitely looks like a grass box deck could be a thing thanks to Torterra EX. There's even the one prize Torterra with Evo Press that does 50 damage for each of your evolution Pokemon in play. And we do play quite a few evolutions within this list here. The only thing, obviously, there's a Shaman of Iron Leaves and a Radiant Venusaur, which are not evolutions, but you are able to still get a ton of evolutions out with Grottles, Lilligant, Toadscruel, and stuff like that. Torterra also has a monstrous amount of HP with 340. It's going to be pretty hard to KO. Being a grass type will also be very powerful when playing against Charizard EX and even Roaring Moon, which I'm sure this deck we'll have a good time against, thanks to the Toadscruel for the support. Torterra EX does look to be a pretty fun and new deck and could revive and create a brand new grass box deck in Standard. Alright, now we have a couple more Paradox Pokemon we gotta look at, starting things off with Ginfire EX. Now, Ginfire is a very powerful basic Fire EX Pokemon that can do 260 damage for the 3 energy. Thankfully, it is an ancient Pokemon, meaning that you can build it up pretty easily with Professor Sada's Vitality and Magma Basin to attach energy. The downside of using Ginfire is when you do the 260 damage attack, you can't use the attack again until you move from the active spot. Now, thankfully, we can pair it with a ton of switch cards with Switch, and even Prime Catcher as a pseudo switch card. Now, the way that I like to play it, and the one that I'm excited to try it out, is with Iron Valiant. Iron Valiant Entei is already a deck that exists in our current format, but Iron Valiant Ginfire might be the upgrade the deck needed, because now we have an even stronger basic fire Pokemon with Ginfire. Of course, this build here that got top 16 at a City League does still play the Entei V in the deck as an attacker, which can still be a decent early game attacker. You do have stuff like Delphox V in the deck you can play, and of course, Tachyon Bits being able to put 20 damage on one of your opponent's Pokemon can be really good to help fix the math for Ginfire. Even though you do 260 damage, sometimes you gotta do a little bit more damage to get higher numbers, and that's where the Iron Valiant really comes in clutch, because then all of a sudden you can do stuff like 280 to 300 damage pretty darn quickly. Thankfully, we can build it up pretty fast thanks to the Sada and the Magma Basin, making Ginfire a pretty oppressive new deck. And I am super excited to try it out, and I really do like the idea of pairing it with Iron Valiant. Alright, the next Paradox Pokemon we gotta look at is Walking Wake EX. Now, technically, Walking Wake is considered the worst of the Johto Dog Paradox Pokemon, but I still think Walking Wake has some potential. It's actually got a really strong attack, which does 120 damage plus 120 more damage if your opponent's active Pokemon is affected by a special condition. Of course, we can pair this with Brute Bonnet and Ancient Booster Capsule in order to afflict the special condition. Now, the attack does need a Water and a double Turbo, meaning that you can Sada to the Walking Wake and attach a double Turbo Energy card from your hand to attack with the Walking Wake in a single turn, and you can do some decent damage pretty quickly. Its own ability has a built-in shred effect, which is nice. Of course, you're playing against something like Mimikyu or even something like Gudra V-Star. Being able to shred through them for free is pretty nice. You can also use Walking Wake with Ancient Booster Capsule also to give it even more HP. Now, one thing I like about Walking Wake is the other Pokemon you can pair it with. Now, one of the main ways I think you want to play it with is probably going to be having some Cloth in your deck. Now, of course, having a fighting type attacker will be pretty decent in our new format against Iron Hands, Miraidon, and Arceus V-Star. So having the Cloth as a one-prize attacker that works with Brute Bonnet and Double Turbo, which of course you already play in the deck for the Walking Wake, it's kind of a no-brainer not to already just throw in a Cloth within your deck. This could be the brand new Cloth Electro deck, to be honest with you. Now, of course, there is also something like Fluttermane, which this list does play here. Fluttermane does have an annoying ability, which can slow down Lost Zone decks. Radiant Greninja could be the ideal Radiant to play. Maybe you can play Radiant Sneasler, but Greninja could be good, of course, as it does get energy in the discard pile for the Professor Sada's Vitality, and, of course, having some Mew EX in the deck as a pseudo draw engine isn't bad. The only other card I can think of to play in Walking Wake is probably Palkia V-Star as another really strong attacker. Of course, Palkia V-Star can power up Walking Wake in a single turn with Star Portal, so you could also play Palkia V-Star within your Walking Wake deck too if you want to use that as a way to build up the Walking Wake. Walking Wake could be the brand new Roaring Moon in a way where it's a nice big basic Pokemon that can do big damage, and having the extra type coverage with the Cloth is really nice too, and I can't wait to try a Walking Wake and prove the haters wrong. And finally, we have a Raging Bolt EX deck. Now, funnily enough, it actually took me a while to find a Raging Bolt deck list for this video. Not because there's not that many out there, but because there's so many different versions and ways to play the Raging Bolt deck. Trust me, you will go down a rabbit hole of different Raging Bolt decks. But it's a very unique and versatile card with this attack, which for a lightning and a fighting energy does 70 damage, and you can discard any amount of basic energy from your Pokemon, doing 70 damage for each energy discarded in this way. Of course, that doesn't have a damage cap, and there are ways to accelerate energy onto your board, like Professor Sada's Vitality, as Raging Bolt is an ancient Pokemon. But the main kicker is playing the Sandy Shocks in the deck, which is a fighting version of Galarian Moltres V. Now, your opponent does need to take 2 prizes before you can do this, but Sandy Shocks ability does allow you to attach a fighting energy from your discard pile to your Sandy Shocks. This also allows you to stack it, so you can have multiple Sandy Shocks in play, accelerating an energy onto it every single turn from your discard pile. This allows you to easily fuel Raging Bolt's attack, on top of having the Professor Sada's Vitality in the deck as a way to get energy onto your Raging Bolt. Now, there are other ways you can play this card, but I do like this more simplistic approach for today's deck list. Of course, we do have the Koraidon in the deck we looked at in that Roaring Moon Ancient Box deck, doing 30 damage for each of your ancient Pokemon in play. Of course, this deck does play mostly ancient Pokemon. It does have a Radiant Greninja, though, which is a great card to synergize with Sandy Shocks and Professor Sada's Vitality. There's the Fluttermane in the deck to slow your opponent down, and there's even a great Tusk you can play to help mill your opponent even more. And like I said, there are different ways you can play this card. I've seen it with Palkia, Goldango. I've seen it with Kirlia, Gardevoir. There's a ton of ways you can play this deck, and I definitely think Raging Bolt is looking to be a really fun new deck with all the different ways to play. We'll have to see what the best way to play the Raging Bolt will be. But I definitely will say this, Raging Bolt will see play with Sandy Shocks EX no matter what, and that's definitely going to be the way to go. And also, Raging Bolt is one of the free decks you get on live when the set does drop, so there you go. Boom, if you want to upgrade that free deck you get on live, here you go. This could be the list to use for today's video. But that'll be it for me with the 12 Temporal Forces deck list. Again, I didn't include any post-rotation updated archetypes like Lugia or Arceus or anything, because I could have put Cinccino in that category with Lugia, or obviously maybe Arc Piles, but overall, I just wanted to keep it with just the new cards with a good mix of EXs and single price decks in today's video. There's a ton of decks. There's even a few archetypes I maybe wanted to include, but there's just too many things to put in this video. Man, I cannot wait for rotation tomorrow to drop on Pokemon TCG Live alongside the new set release. We have been really itching for a new set for a while now because we had a long format with Paradox Rift, and it's finally time to give the format a send-off and be introduced to a brand new era of the Pokemon TCG, and I just cannot wait. And if y'all are new here to the second channel, make sure to subscribe down below to help me on the road to reaching 12,000 subs, and make sure to leave a like on the video if you're going to enjoy, and if you liked the deck list in today's video that you can try out for yourself tomorrow on Pokemon TCG Live. That'll be for me. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch y'all soon. Bye-bye.